United we're as strong as a mountain. United we're as deep as the sea.
This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek. I'm going to welcome you to our show. And today's show is going to look at the situation of adjunct faculty here in California and nationally, and also the continuing struggle to take up the rights of adjunct faculty. Many of them are known as freeway flyers. They're working at many campuses and living on subsistence living wages and benefits, and they're frankly stressed out about their situation. And as a result of that, there is some organizing going on, and we're going to interview some of the organizers of adjunct faculty who have been struggling many years to advance the conditions of adjunct faculty. So joining us is Dr. Seyedd Khaled Hussain, who works at East Los Angeles Community College, and we'll talk with him further. Keith Hoeller, who is a co-founder of the Washington Part-Time Faculty Association, the Green River College Adjunct Faculty Association, and chair of the Adjunct Faculty Committee, Washington State Chapter of the American Association of University Professors, and editor of Equality for Contingent Faculty, Overcoming the Two-Tier System. Jack Longmate, who has served as an adjunct English instructor at Olympic College from 1992 to 2020, and he is an author with the book, a co-author, Program for Change, Real Transformation in 2 Decades. And he also authored Proposed College for All Would Be a Disaster for Adjunct Professors, and David CCA and CCCI unions at each of his colleges. And he serves as the chair of the CFT part-time committee in the late 1990s and founded the CTA state and NEA national contingent faculty caucuses, and serves as chair and director of administration for the California chair of the San Diego Adjunct Faculty Association. And Rick Baum is a lecturer at San Francisco City College, who has taught many years, and also has been an activist in fighting for adjuncts at City College and statewide, and is also a member of the Higher Education Action Team, which is a community labor caucus at San Francisco City College. So welcome all of you to the show Workweek. So welcome all of you to the show Workweek. Why don't we start with the recent, I think, scandal incident that's taken place. And I want to introduce Dr. Seyedd Khaled Hussain, who teaches at East Los Angeles Community College. He's worked at community colleges his entire life. He's from Bangladesh, and he has served as a student worker, classified staff, faculty, online pedagogy, trainer, and distance education coordinator, administrator, faculty union member, union activist. And he was also a member of, American Federation of Teachers since 1992, and has served as chapter president, grievance representative, delegate, vice president of his local, and been teaching political science and education technology for 21 years, and has been voted by students one of the top 5 professors in the Los Angeles Mission College, the only adjunct professor to earn that distinction that year. So welcome to the program, Khaled. Okay, so Khaled, first of all, welcome to the show. And why don't you talk about how you got into teaching and ended up at East Los Angeles Community College?
Sure. I was a student at East Los Angeles College before I became a professor. So one of my political science professors actually talked to me after class one day and said, I think you should teach. And here I was, barely a community college student, no degrees. And he was asking me if I would like to teach someday. And I said, I never even thought about it. But he became my mentor, Professor Joel Bush, professor of political science. Unfortunately, he just passed away 2 months ago. And he mentored me all the way through my master's degree. And 6 months before I got my master's degree, he asked me to fill out an application for teaching. And I said, I haven't even graduated yet. How can I apply? And he said, no, you can apply 6 months before you graduate. So I applied. I graduated in May or June of 2001, and I started teaching September of 2001. Actually, it was the same week when the 9/11 attack took place. And with a name like Khaled Hussain, I received a lot of attention.
Very stressful. I know other Arab Americans, Muslims who came under tremendous attack as a result of 9/11.
Yeah, and a lot of people mistook me for Arab. I'm not Arab. I'm from Bangladesh. I'm like 99% Indian. It's just there's a lot of Muslims in Bangladesh, and my parents named me with Arabic names as traditional in Muslim countries.
Sure. So you began teaching, and also you got involved in the union. Why don't you talk about why you got involved in the union?
Sure. I got involved long before I started teaching. I was a classified employee of the Los Angeles Community College District, the same district that includes East Los Angeles College. And my very first permanent classified full-time job was at Los Angeles Harbor College. And for whatever reason, the classified union and the faculty union belong to the same local, American Federation of Teachers, Local 1521. So we were all AFT, faculty, adjunct, classified, we were on the same union, same team. And everybody said that it actually increased our power because we're all part of the same team. We negotiate. To make a long story short, I started working in 1992 as a full-time classified employee. I was 21 years old. And for whatever reason, the classified employees at Harbor College were very unhappy with their existing chapter president. And so some of the other classified delegates, union activists, they were looking for somebody who would be willing to take some challenging work. I had no idea what I was getting into. They talked me into it. I agreed to run, and I was not allowed to even be placed on the ballot, my name. So I was actually elected as a write-in. And when I was elected, the election was invalidated because the existing chapter president opened some of the ballot envelopes. And so they had to hold a new election. And I asked again, may I be on the ballot this time? No, it will be exactly the same way it was last time. So you will have to be written in again. And the campus wrote me in again. And I was elected as chapter president. And that was the start in 1992 as a classified American Federation of Teachers union chapter president. And I kept working for the next 10 years very actively in union as chapter president, grievance representative, delegate, and eventually was voted by the entire 9 college district to be the vice president of the local. That's as far as I got.
And you continue, and then you also became a lecturer and academic. Why don't you talk about that?
Correct. In 2001, I became an adjunct professor, as I told you. But something more important happened in my life in 1998, and that was I got married. And my wife saw how stressed I was and how busy I was with union work. And she told me that you really need to focus on, you just finishing college and focus on your family a little more, please. So in 2000, I served as the vice president up to 2000. And then once I got my degree in 2001, I signed up with the faculty union as an adjunct professor, but I also started working. I kept working as a classified employee, and I was promoted to a supervisory position, and I was no longer a part of the union I was leading before. But I did serve as a grievance rep and chapter president for the SEIU Supervisors Union at Los Angeles Valley College for about 4 or 5 years. And
the Los Angeles community college system is one of the largest in the world. Why don't you talk about what we're talking, how many people it represents and how many students it has?
Currently has, the enrollment really dropped precipitously. So it has more than 120,000 students right now.
Wow.
It's huge. I mean, there was a time when we had 250,000 students easily. So after the pandemic, the enrollment really dropped. And what happens in every economic cycle, and I have been through several in my 33 years working for that district, whenever there's a high employment rate, not unemployment, high employment rate, lots of people are working. When unemployment rate is below 3%, our enrollment goes down. But whenever there's high unemployment and we go into a recession, our enrollment goes up. So that's the cycle we're in. So we had the pandemic, but on top of that, we have had full employment for a long time, and the economy has been very robust with lots of people working. And our college, our district has been insisting that the students come back in person. They have a back to campus slogan that they're doing. And most of the students are working and they're not willing to come back in person because the campus still is reporting COVID cases happening every single day. We're notified by the president's office by email every single day. Just last week, there were 9 confirmed COVID cases. So the pandemic is not over. It's a lot of people have put it in the back of our minds, but it's very much there. And the students are not coming back. They're more insistent on taking online classes. So online classes are filling with 40, 45 students, but whenever we have these mandatory in-person classes that they're offering to get students to come back, students who live right next to your college will take a class hundreds of miles away because it's being offered online, the same class. So there's that dichotomy going on online versus in-person going on right now. So that's the current situation in our district.
And the union fought to have a protection, proper ventilation and PPE for these students coming back and for the faculty and staff?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay, so you began to take up the issues of adjuncts, and we're going to talk with other panelists here about that issue. But what was your situation as an adjunct, and why did you get involved in taking up the fight of adjunct faculty members?
Oh, this happened very recently, and I told all my friends on the panel, actually Jack and Keith, who I have known for a few days, and Rick I just got to meet just the other day. I got involved in Rights for Adjuncts just very recently, it's like 2 or 3 months ago. After 21 years of teaching, I just kept my head down, made sure I had a day job to pay my bills. Teaching was a passion for me. I loved teaching, but I was never allowed to do it full time. I was a finalist once, didn't get the job. And then after I applied again at my college, I was not even given an interview. So something happens when you are an adjunct for a long time. There's kind of a stench that you develop. It's called an adjunct stench. And sometimes they won't even give you an interview. But anyway, in 2016, I started becoming an activist for OER, Open Education Resources, free textbooks, basically. So in 2016, I still attended my department meetings, and I brought that OER issue to my department meeting and introduced it. My department, my colleague, a political science full-time tenured professor, is also the president of the academic senate. And so I gave it to him, and I introduced it to everybody else, but I could not even get the time of the day from this academic senate president or any full-time professors. The adjunct professors asked me, oh, can you give me the link? I would like to check it out. It's a free textbook. It was actually a good textbook. So to make a long story short, after relentless activism, pushing, reminding, cajoling, pestering, the OER finally I was given the permission to use it. Officially, you don't need permission. An adjunct professor or a full-time professor, they can pick their own textbook. But here I was told, no, you need to let the senior faculty decide if it's appropriate, and then you should not just go by yourself. So once I started using it, I got the go-ahead from the faculty, the tenured faculty. I received an email from OER. It's called OpenStax. And they asked me, I requested that I receive not just a book. I already had the book. I already had the text. I wanted the instructional resources, all the test banks, all the questions, and so on. Anything that you receive as an instructor for a regular textbook. And so they wanted to verify that I'm indeed a professor. So they wanted me to provide them the link to my department webpage where I'm listed as an adjunct or as a professor. And so I have never had a chance to look for that. So I went ahead and looked. I was not listed anywhere. And so I contacted my vice chair of political science. Our department is so huge that every discipline has its own vice chair. And so I contacted my vice chair and I said, I need to provide this link to prove that I'm a professor. I don't see my name in the website. What's up? I don't see any other adjunct faculty name on the website. There are 18 faculty members in our department. Only 5 are full-time and the 13 are adjuncts. Most of the classes are taught by adjuncts. Majority of the classes are taught by adjuncts. And most of the students are educated in poli-sci by adjuncts. So his reply to me was, we don't have to list adjunct faculty on our website. That's what got my attention finally. That woke me up. I'm like, what? We're teaching most of the classes. Yeah. This makes no sense. And then college lately started to push a campaign of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I stated to my vice chair that in the name of diversity, equity, inclusion, I can see your picture is on the website, your teaching philosophy is on the website, your bio is on the website, your areas of interest are listed on the website. All the students can see those before they sign up for your classes. Most of the classes are taught by the majority of the adjuncts in the department, in the discipline. Why aren't they listed? Why we are talking about DEI and there's no DEI for adjuncts? Mm-hmm. And I struggled with this for more than a year and a half. And I finally realized for adjuncts what DEI meant. It meant discrimination, exclusion, and inequity. That's our DEI. And so I was so upset that I finally ran for office. Again, the irony of this is I was written in again as a write-in candidate for delegate to the union's executive board. I'm like, where is this coming from? Is it the district doing it to us? As a political science professor, you have to take all these things into account. So I was putting my expertise into my own situation. And then I realized the district is only following what the union negotiated for us. And our district is controlled by our union. Majority of our board of trustees, the members of the board of trustees, are bankrolled, handpicked, and elected by our union. Any administrator who is disliked by the union cannot stay in their job for too long. The board of trustees, all it needs a call from the union president and they would remove that administrators. And a lot of people don't know this. Because I was an administrator, I know this. You should read an administrator's contract and look at the California Education Code for the rights of administrators. They have none. They're at-will employee. They can be fired without cause, without any recourse. It's written in their contracts. So when I became the delegate on the executive board, which is the highest decision-making body in the union, the only higher body for decision-making is the membership itself. I started asking these questions at the executive board meeting. And that got a backlash. I realized that I could only find one other delegate who was an adjunct on the executive board. There are more than, I believe, 35 or 40 people on the executive board. All the officers from the central district-wide officers, and then the 9 chapter presidents, they are the officers. None of them are adjuncts. The chief negotiator is a full-time faculty, tenured full-time faculty. So one of the very first meetings I attended, I noticed on the agenda, there was a short item that said, give more time to chapter presidents to serve and help their members, which sounded very good to me. And my chapter president from East Los Angeles College made a motion to move that agenda item up for discussion, so it'll come up first. And I felt I will support my chapter president. Doesn't matter if he's adjunct or full-time, he's full-time tenured. But if I want to give my chapter president more time to help us, that's good. So I supported that. It was moved up, and then it was discussed. I asked the question if there was any fiscal impact to that motion. And there was silence. And all of a sudden, there was a low voice. It was the treasurer, newly elected treasurer, who said it was going to cost the union more than $400,000. And I fell off my chair. I said, what are you talking about? Isn't this release time we're trying to get from the district for the chapter presidents? She said, no, that has to be negotiated. And since it is before negotiations, this is going to come straight out of the union treasury. And I was, along with my other adjunct friend on the e-board, we were both very upset. We both voted against it, but it passed overwhelmingly. Because you have to understand, the chapter presidents, most of them are also department chairs on their respective campus. And many of the delegates on the e-board work in their departments. So they do not want to go against their own department chairs who are also chapter presidents. And here's the funny thing that happened. When we took the first vote was anonymous. It's a poll, electronic poll that we do because we meet just like we're meeting now on Zoom. So the first vote, it was defeated by a narrow margin, but it was defeated. And then the chapter president asked for a roll call. This time it was different. It passed. So people who voted against it felt intimidated to vote against it openly, against their own chapter chairs. Against their own chapter presidents or department chairs. So it passed. And so the first thing I did after that day, the meeting, I actually wrote an email that I sent a copy of to Keith and Jack, maybe Rick too, to everybody all faculty in the district. I looked up the annual compensation of all the officers in Transparent California, and I published it, and I told them that on top of this, many of them, the chief negotiator's salary came to, salary and benefits came to $353,000. And many of the chapter presidents, they were making more than $250,000. And I said, this is the additional $25,000 to $30,000 they're going to get. It's going to be coming straight from the union's treasury, our dues money, on top of this full salary and the 0.6 FTEF release time they get. And that was the start. And the subject of my email was justice for adjuncts. And I also pointed out all the inequities we're suffering, the DEIs we're suffering. Remember, discrimination, exclusion, and inequity? And started a list of things that we need the union should negotiate to get to a level of equity. I started with, I think, 7 or 8, and then all these adjuncts started writing back to me Now it's a list of 27 items.
So you're saying that basically the adjuncts, although they are teaching a large percentage of the classes, are not really getting representation on the union.
That's correct.
And that basically there's a discrimination by the union structure, the union leadership, to prevent the adjuncts from getting representation, even though you're paying dues like other members.
This is what's going on. My union is in the business of wealth transfer. Take the wealth created by the work of the adjuncts and give it to the full-time tenured faculty in forms of salary and benefits. That's the wealth transfer that's taking place. Make no mistake. That's exactly what's happening right now. The adjuncts are paid a fraction of wages for the same exact work. We teach the same exact class that the full-time faculty teach, yet we get a fraction of the wage. Plus, why that is? Because my union negotiated a contract where there are only 4 or 5 steps of increments for adjuncts, but there are more than 20 for full-time faculty. And we get no benefits. You were talking about at the beginning of this program, Steve, you were talking about the adjuncts work for very little pay and benefits. And I was thinking, what benefits? We get no benefits. The district started offering, the union made a gigantic fuss and deal over forcing the union to offer adjuncts health benefits. Do you know how it is? It is based on pro rata of how many classes you're teaching of a full-time percentage. If you're teaching 2 3-unit classes, then you're at 0.4. If you're teaching 3 3-unit classes, then you're at a 0.6. So if you're at a 0.6, and I was teaching 0.6 at one point until they took it away from me, another story, but even at 0.6, I would have to pay the remainder 40% of the premiums. So I tried to sign up for it. And when I was signing up for it, it turned out I could not afford the premium just for myself. And when I tried to include my wife and son, it comes to thousands of dollars a month, thousands of dollars a month. So no one can afford it. Here's all this hoopla, the brouhaha, the enormous fanfare which the unions are using, that we are getting healthcare for part-time faculty. It is absolute nonsense. Do you know how many of the more than 3,000 adjuncts get health insurance through our district? It's 324. It's only people who have no other options, who are desperate, who have cancer, life-threatening diseases. So what they're doing is they're on public assistance anyway, they're on food stamps, and whatever money they make teaching their classes, they're pouring it right back into their health insurance. So this is the wealth transfer. That's the business, my union, and not just mine. I mean, I only know my union. I have never worked at any other union for 21 years. So Keith and Jack and David and Rick would know. But I believe it's common. The unions are in the business of exploiting the adjuncts. We work for next to nothing, no benefits. And the FTES we get, you understand what FTES, right? Full-time equivalent students. That's how we get our funding from the state. That's apportionment. That we bring in the most of the bacon. We bring home the bacon, the adjunct faculty.
Well, it seems like you're doing a lot of the work, the adjunct faculty.
We're doing most of the work.
And yet you're not getting benefits. You're not treated equally as other faculty, full-time faculty.
And not paid. And look at my department. It's the social science department. I'm just part of one discipline, which has 18 political science faculty. 13 of them are adjuncts. But in the entire department, there are almost 200, depending on the semester, between 160 to 200 adjuncts. Do you know how many votes we get to elect our department chair? 1. 200 adjuncts will elect 1 representative, and we all 200 of us get 1 vote to elect our department chair, where every tenured faculty or full-time faculty get each one vote. So remember the 3/5 compromise our nation had during the shameful time of slavery? We're not even 3/5. We're 1/200.
Okay, well, you brought up these issues of your treatment and also the money that the officials are making. And there was a letter that was sent to you by the lawyer for the union, Lawrence Rosenzweig, and James McKeever, president of AFT Local 1521, on October 13th. How did this letter come about, and what was the response of the union to your basically making public some of these issues that are critical in your view to how you're being treated?
Well, basically, I was a whistleblower with just three emails that I sent out. I revealed what the union was doing and how it was. The union itself acknowledges that 69% of its members are adjuncts, 69%, and 31% are full-time. And the emails that I sent out, it revealed scandalous details of the inequities we're suffering. And it was not well liked by the full-time faculty at the executive board. So the letter I received accused me of, the first letter that I received, it did not talk about dual unionism. It talked about I was trying to represent within the union and starting a competing union, which I have never done without any evidence. The word represent was mentioned, I believe, in quotations. I don't have the letter right in front of me. I wish I had. So I looked up, I'm a delegate, I'm an elected delegate. I looked up the meaning of the word delegate in the dictionary. And the dictionary says a delegate is a person who represents other people who they selected to take care of their interests. So it's a lawyer and the union president that jointly wrote that letter to me. It looks like they have not even cared to look up the meaning of the word delegate. I'm a delegate to the executive board, and look up, you can live right now, you can Google the word delegate and look up the online dictionary and see what it means. I am supposed to represent, and I am there to represent. And when I represent, please pardon me if I try to represent the most vulnerable, most exploited, most abused, most disrespected, most inequitably treated, and most discriminatorily treated people first. And that's 70% of our union members.
Okay.
I make no apologies for representing them.
And they say in this letter, the purpose of this letter is to request that you voluntarily withdraw from your position on the Guild Executive Board.
Correct. Because they're afraid I am part of the entire conversation, how they're because our negotiations are coming up, starting in January or February. And these 3 emails that I sent out, remember that list of adjunct demands that went up to 27? I asked every adjunct to fill out the contract negotiation survey, and there's one area that they made available where you could actually write in, what else do you need? And I told them to copy and paste those 27 demands. And overwhelmingly, they did. The problem is the union is not publishing all of a sudden the result of that survey. We still haven't received it. The survey closed a month ago, and we still haven't received the result of that survey. So I don't know how they're trying to sweep that survey under the rugs, because the majority of the union members, we each get 1 vote when it comes to union election, have spoken, and they want those 27 items. And Keith and Jack, they have a list of those. I don't know if I have sent it to you, Steve. I will be happy to send it to you. And this was developed collaboratively by the adjuncts of the 9 campuses. This is what we need. And you know what number 1 was? Number 1 was, if an adjunct worked anywhere in the district for 8 years, they automatically receives tenure and full-time status.
And this idea of a letter from the lawyer and the union president to you, did you feel that? It sounds like coercion, that they're actually threatening you to leave your union position without any kind of trial, without any kind of process for these accusations that you want to form a competing union.
Yes.
You think that's ethical?
No.
I mean, it seems like a pretty serious matter when the lawyer and the union president say you better resign or else.
So, Steve, I received that letter on a Friday afternoon. Then that same Sunday, I received an email from the president. Friday afternoon, I get the letter from the lawyer and the president. Then with less than 48 hours later, Sunday night, I get an email from the president saying, I am suspending you until you reply to our letter or pending action by the executive board. And then on Monday, I get another less than 24 hours later, I get an email from the same president saying, I have been suspended by the executive board. I will not be allowed to attend executive board meetings at the local or at the campus level. So those three things speak for themselves. Judge, jury, and executioner. No evidence, no trial, no opportunity to present my side. I am excluded. And they asked me to resign. Am I going to resign? Forget it. Never. I have no intention of resigning. I'm an elected member of the executive board. I'm an elected delegate of the executive board. And then the Constitution and bylaws of the union states very clearly the executive board is comprised of the delegate and the officers.
And isn't also the bylaws require a hearing? I mean, some kind of process before you're suspended? I mean, it seems like it's unilateral action to remove you without even any due process, any democratic process.
Correct. But the bylaws are very short and simple. And it doesn't even get to it doesn't even talk about that a delegate can be pushed out. There's no, it doesn't even get into that. It just says the executive board will be comprised of delegates and officers. Basically, that's it.
Well, in that case, it's usually the national bylaws of the AFT. If the union local bylaws do not have language concerning removal of officers, then it goes to the AFT national bylaws, which probably, I would guess, require a hearing, some kind of process, democratic process, before the removal of an officer, for a cause. Well, this is a serious issue, and I think that this attack is something not just about you, but all adjunct faculty who face issues of representation, because your removal obviously is not representing the adjunct faculty who are going into negotiation now. So why don't we go to Keith Hoeller. Keith, why don't you talk about, you've been organizing for many years for adjunct faculty, and it seems you're also a member of the AFT. You've been a member of the AFT and the NEA. Are you surprised by what's happened to Khaled?
Whenever an adjunct activist speaks up on behalf of adjuncts, the unions retaliate. They've been doing this for a long time. It's happened in Washington State. It's happened in California. It's happened throughout the country. And I want to go back to one point because I didn't realize I was muted. I've looked carefully at the bylaws of Khaled's local. They have no right whatsoever to remove him from the executive board. There is nothing in the bylaws that gives them the right to do that, let alone, as Steve tried to raise, if they tried to do anything at all, there should have been a meeting called that he was invited to. There should have been a hearing. There should have been a chance to respond. But even so, the union has violated its own bylaws to get rid of him. Now, why is any of this happening? I've been saying for about 30 years now that these unions are illegal. Now, what on earth do I mean by that? What I mean is that the Supreme Court ruled in 1980 that the full-time tenure track faculty were managers or supervisors and not entitled to a union at all. That was in the Yeshiva decision by the National Labor Relations Board. You will not find any mixed unions with full-timers and part-timers in them in any private college in America as a result of this ruling. There are also state laws that govern public colleges, and they all universally say that a bargaining unit should be composed of people with a community of interest and devoid of serious conflicts of interest. Well, when you have two tiers, there are serious conflicts of interest, as Khaled's situation points out. But finally, state laws also forbid putting supervisors into the same units with the people they supervise. So if this is illegal, how have they gotten away with it? By and large, it's because both the colleges and the unions deny that the full-time faculty are supervisors of the part-time faculty. They deny this wholesale. And since it takes a union to do a unit clarification with something like the California Public Employee Relations Board, to get supervisors out of the unit, only unions can go and get them out. Now, it might be possible to find another way to do that, either through a law or through a complaint with the California Public Employee Relations Board. But the K through 12 unions, the AFT and NEA, you don't find principals in those unions. The NEA started off as a union of principals. Nowadays, they will not let principals in the unions. And so we've got our, whatever you put employees into units run by their supervisors, labor movement has a name for this. It's called a company union or a yellow union. In other words, it's not a real union. And so throughout America, we have 1.5 million college professors who are not in real unions. Now, they don't want to let us go because then we're larger and we'd have to face us at the bargaining table. So they claim that they represent us and that they're doing things on our behalf. But whenever someone actually says, wait a minute, you know, your union negotiators makes $300,000 a year, and Khaled's lucky to make $30,000 a year, and you haven't done anything for Khaled for 20 years, what's going on? And they respond by violating their own union laws and throwing him out of the union, violating his due process. And I hope, and it will encourage him to file an unfair labor practice with the California PERB board. That's the first place he should go. And so we deserve our own unions. We deserve unions where we are the majority. I've called the system we've got now faculty apartheid, because a minority of full-timers dominate and control. And what happens when someone rises up, because the full-timers control the chairs and division chairs, and they have tenure and he has no job security, they can get rid of anyone. And I have to say, it certainly looks like they're threatening his job with the propaganda they put out, mischaracterizing him as engaging in dual union, mischaracterizing him as threatening the union, when all he's done is what union people ought to do, and everything he's done is protected by law. He has done what union members should be doing. And so I'm sorry to say this happened to Jack Longmate when he stood up in Washington. We had another adjunct in Washington who testified that part-timers were getting screwed on annual raises, 90% of which went to full-timers, even though we outnumbered them 2-to-1. And they removed him from the executive board. They had a recall election and removed him. First time it's ever happened in 30 years with anybody, and it happened to an adjunct.
So it sounds like this is not a new action to retaliate against adjuncts who take this fight up in their union.
This is a playbook of corrupt unions. It's a playbook to threaten people who don't have job security and to try to keep them docile. And they do, and usually whenever I raise that we have a majority, somebody says, well, take over the union. And I go, it would be a bloodbath. Because the people that stand up, they're not like meerkats. Okay, meerkats, you stand up, one gets down and when someone steps up. When adjunct steps up, they cut off his head and everybody keeps down, keeps low. Now these are supposed to be unions that don't even do this in the K through 12. The same unions wouldn't dare do this to a K through 12 teacher. Yet it's structural, it's systemic throughout higher education. And Khaled is absolutely right. It's not the colleges, it's the unions that have bargained these Jim Crow contracts. And I grew up in the South. I grew up in Miami, Florida. They'll think of that as South, it's South. I grew up in the 50s and we had separate white and colored drinking fountains, okay? We had colored and white pools, we had everything. And our contracts read like that. They read exactly like that. And so Khaled has stepped forward. I hope others will step forward. Some already are. And I think ultimately the union is going to have to answer for what they've done. And here's the nice part. We intend to hold the California Federation of Teachers and the American Federations of Teachers responsible for what they're doing to Khaled.
Thank you. And Jack, why don't you talk about your experience, because it seems like that you as well was retaliated against for taking up the concerns of adjunct faculty.
The source of my trouble with my union, and I was a union officer at the time, was the fact that I opposed a bill that the union was quite gung-ho in supporting. It was a faculty salary bill providing incremental pay step increases. As Keith noted, those funds, 90% of those funds go to full-time faculty and roughly 10% go to part-timers. I was hoping that there could be a more of an equal distribution when I opposed that bill. But when I did, both the leadership in my union at my local, along with the state, got on my case, and immediately I was scheduled to take part in a union event, about a week from the point that I testified. Well, the union president said that I was no longer, the state union president said that I was no longer able to take part. And at my college, I faced a great deal of mobbing, where people would not acknowledge me walking down the hallway, and a lot of email attacks. The former head negotiator, for example, sent me an email, sent it to me, but copied the whole of the union saying, Jack, it would appear that the honest way to handle your opposition to this bill that you testified against would be to have brought it up at a union meeting. Well, I had brought it up at a union meeting. I was secretary at the time, and the draft minutes of that meeting had already been circulated. In that, I recounted the discussion I had with the union president. I asked him, what will this bill do for adjuncts? And his response was to say, I don't know. I wrote back to this former head negotiator who accused me of being dishonest for not having brought up my concerns, pointing out that in the minutes of the meeting, I termed the bill taxation without representation, because the increment funds that are returned to each school are based upon the aggregate of funds going to all faculty. That is, adjunct faculties are part of those funds. But because adjuncts don't get those funds, or very few of them in the state do, we were excluded, and I was opposed to that. And from that point on, my life as a unionist was terrible. That is, they opposed every idea that I suggested. There's a lot more to it, but that kind of is a nutshell of the nature of thing that happened to me.
As I drafted the bill that he got in trouble for, I wanted to clarify, because it applies to Khaled's college as well. I got the statistics, and I found out that at every community college in Washington State, of which there are 30, the full-timers had negotiated for themselves at these colleges annual step raises of about $1,100 a year. They didn't have to do anything, just every year they get $1,100 raise. At 2/3 of the colleges, the same unions had bargained no annual raises whatsoever for the full-timers, none. So at several colleges where I taught, after 20 years of teaching, I never got a raise. I got the same as someone starting out. So when I put together a bill that would have simply split the amount of money available for these raises between full-timers and part-timers, keep in mind there's twice as many, so part-timers would still only get half the same amount of money. Even then, the unions went berserk. They went absolutely berserk. And they weren't going to hear of it. And they fought us and fought of us. And Jack deserves credit because he got a representative to change a budget bill. So from 10% to about 40% of the legislative money would go to part-timers. Then after 2006. But I thought and hoped the unions would then bargain incremental steps for their part-timers. They didn't. They just took the money for the part-timers and gave it as a cost the board raises, defeating the purpose of rewarding those people who work the most for their experience. And so instead of everybody who's at the top getting a hefty raise, everybody got a little tiny bit. And still to this day, they still haven't bargained annual raises for most of the part-timers at these colleges. And goodness forbid, an adjunct should demand equality from their union. Wow.
This
And of
does,
course, the effect on the students, I mean, if you have a faculty, a large number of the faculty who are oppressed, who have substandard conditions, who aren't able to have really a decent standard of living and no seniority, this must have an effect on the students and the kind of education that you're getting. David, what were your lessons or experiences at San Diego?
Yeah, I was in 4 colleges, 4 districts in San Diego County, all the way south of the border, north to Oceanside, and just everywhere. And I was on the union in all of them. And I was shocked because I thought I was joining the union back in the late 90s. I was going to be involved and make things better. So the president of the union came up and said, "Hey, Dave, you're active. Would you like to be on our board?" I went, "Yes, I can get in there and do something." So I was on the bargaining team. And at one point they said, "Well, the state's giving us 6% increase. What should we do with it?" And the lead, one of the members, who was the highest paid on the campus, said, "Well, if we were fair, we would give it all to part-time faculty to make up for their horrible pay." This brought about a wave of laughter in the room for about 5 minutes. And then they went back to give us our 1% share. Then we're bargaining and health benefits were on the board. And I kept pushing, mention it, push it, put it. And the lead negotiator said, "Well, David, how hard do you want me to push for these medical benefits for part-timers? I'm so tired of this." I said, "Well, as hard as you're pushing for all these things you're getting for full-time faculty, these golden handshakes and raises and all these benefits." So that annoyed him. And so at the next election, they were more subtle than they were with Khaled in Los Angeles. What they do in San Diego is when there's an election, they just find a part-timer who knows nothing and says, "Would you like to be representative?" And they go, "Yeah, what do I have to do?" "Nothing, just sit there and vote yes." "Oh, okay." And then the president sends out a letter to all the member part-timers and says, "You need to vote for Mr. X because that's the best person for the job." And they sit there for years doing nothing. And the union's very happy. And if they're good enough, they get a full-time job. It's been sort of a pipeline for part-timers to get full-time jobs as they sit there and smile and support the union president. So that there's a pipeline there of sellout part-timers. The only honest union that I was ever with was the part-time only union at Maricosta College. And we did a great job of bargaining our first contract, getting an incredible raise, putting in health benefits and office hours, and we work 100% for part-time faculty. And we will not see that in a wall-to-wall. That's my experience.
And Rick, you've written a letter about this is Equity Week for California Federation of Teachers that raised the issue of what's happened to Khaled and how could that be equity? We're talking about many, many thousands of adjunct faculty. What kind of equity are we talking about with this campaign of the CFT?
Well, the CFT, as I understood it, wanted to just inform people about our situation. And equity is a slippery term to use because one person's equity is another person's subordinate, being treated as a subordinate. So that's why I go with what Teacher said. Equality is what we should be fighting for, so that we have equal pay, equal benefits, equal seniority rights, equal job security as the full-time faculty, which is what they have in Vancouver, which I'm sure Jack and Keith could go into more detail on. I do want to say one thing, that what comes across to me from what everyone's saying, I do want to say that the unions vary from one district to another, because I've taught in about about 4 different districts, and there is great variation. And City College of San Francisco, the supervisors, the department chairs have their own union. They're not part of our bargaining unit. Ours consists of the full-time faculty and the part-time faculty. And the full-time faculty are not supervisors, although I think they're the only ones who do evaluations of part-timers. Part-timers don't do evaluations of full-timers. So it's a little bit different from, I think, from one district to another. I mean, I was once in the Contra Costa district, and when we voted on something, we got our vote counted for 1/3 of what a full-timer's vote was. I don't think that's any longer the case. The bottom line for me, a lot of this is that the indignities that part-timers have to put up with. A lot of us, when we first get our jobs, at least I was ecstatic. I was just so grateful to have a job as a teacher, to be in the classroom. And so I was willing to put up with almost anything to have that opportunity, hoping that it would lead to something better. Now I've come to realize that there's just ongoing indignities. Just recent examples in my own union. Some 400 part-timers have lost their jobs over the last 3 years. When the full-timers were threatened with loss of jobs, and some of them have lost their jobs who have tenure, there were emergency meetings called to figure out what can we do. There were never any emergency meetings for part-timers and our loss of jobs. The meetings didn't go anywhere because the union is very ineffectual and lacks power. But nevertheless, that's just one example. Another I want to point out, and I don't have a lot of time, I'm sure, to speak, but recently, back in June, the person who's the executive office director of our union, so it sounds like Khalid's union is one in which all the faculty do all the staff things. At my union, we actually have staff people who are paid out of union dues. And the executive director has a 6-figure salary. And she wrote a bargaining message when they went to bargaining. And she had this to say: "We are here today because the decision has been made by the new chancellor to erode the full-time workforce at City College, no matter the cost to the institution or the community she serves. As a union representing educators, we know all too well that eroding full-time jobs is bad for students, bad for enrollment, bad for programs, bad for institutions, bad for workers, bad for accreditation, bad for communities. What struck me most about this letter is no mention of part-time faculty. And aren't there lots of jobs bad because all these bad results? Yeah. And this is like part of the indignity. We're like nobodies. We aren't taken into consideration. That's right. In terms of what happened. And they reached an agreement last year on a pay, when the administration was threatening 161 full-time tenure faculty with a loss of their jobs. Okay, it's unheard of. And so they made a deal for 1 year that we would take a big major cut in our pay to save everyone's job. And they put out something 2 days before we were voting on the agreement, that the agreement in which we were taking 10% pay cuts would preserve part-time jobs. Well, it turned out that a bunch of part-timers lost their jobs. So instead of everyone getting roughly a 10% pay cut, there were many part-timers who got a 100% pay cut. Yet we were told that this would preserve our jobs. So it just is that's what's going on. And so, one of the complicated things is things really vary from one district to another, but the bottom line is they all have this same issue of treating us as second-class workers. We have two-tier contracts that they have enabled for years now, and it's very detrimental to not only ourselves and our well-being, but the well-being and the effectiveness of for students in terms of their kind of education.
And you've been organizing for many years, all of you, to defend the right of adjuncts. You're going to take up the case of Khaled. How do you see transforming the structure and the representation so you will be treated equally with the other full-time faculty?
Well,
I suggest that Jack or Keith talk about that because they're familiar with Vancouver.
if I could say a few words about Vancouver, we can hold that up as a model to which we should try to emulate. There's a variety, several colleges in British Columbia that have what is called regularization, but the best example is Vancouver Community College that is right in downtown. And basically they're all faculty, whether they are part-time or full-time, whether they're permanent or temporary, are paid according to the same multi-step salary schedule. Not only that, in the case of part-time faculty, it's not like they are hired to just teach as we adjuncts are. They are expected to perform all the non-instructional duties as a full-timer does. That is, if there's committee work or office hours and that sort of thing, they're expected to fill those on a proportional basis if they're part-time. So there's equal pay and equal work. There's also an avenue to obtain job security and permanency, and it's called regularization. And in Vancouver, it involves teaching at least half-time for 2 years. And those don't have to be, they can be cumulative. Once you've taught for 2 years at least half-time, in Vancouver, you automatically become regularized. And with that, you have the right of accrual, meaning that if you're part-time, you can essentially rest assured that you will be given a workload that is at that level. You also have the right of first refusal. That is, you are able to accept additional work before a new instructor is hired. That right of first refusal also extends to those who are not yet regularized, but have been on the job for 5 months. They too have the chance to take on new work. This isn't always the case, but full-timers become full-time at Vancouver by starting out as part-timers and then ratcheting up their workload until they reach 100% full-time. The last detail that I'd like to share is their seniority system. They have a single seniority system that encompasses all faculty, full-time and part-time, permanent and temporary. It's in the same denomination, and it's possible for there to be part-timers who are actually more senior to full-timers. And when I heard that, it really blew my mind. Vancouver, I think, it's a wonderful system. The equal pay would cost more money, but the seniority system and the regularization and those other things, they don't cost more money. I would like to see our unions take an interest in this and hold it up as something, as a model to be followed.
Thank you, Jack. Khaled, you're under attack. You've been removed without a hearing from your position. What can people do to demand that you be reinstated and that the adjunct faculty be respected? Because it's not about you. I mean, it's the disenfranchisement of those large numbers of adjuncts in Los Angeles Community College District.
So I just uploaded a QR code in chat. If you can save it and open it, or open it and save it. If you could please spread the word that we are generating and raising funds for adjunct cause. We have an election coming up in less than 18 months, and we would like to use that fund for ALDEF. ALDEF stands for Adjunct Legal Defense and Advocacy Fund. And David Milroy has already donated from his local, and I was blown away because so far about 58 or right now it's about over 60 people donated to it. But all of a sudden I see SD San Diego Adjunct Faculty Association all of a sudden donating $100.
Yeah.
And it felt, I cannot tell you how it felt. I'm like, who are these people? That was my first question. And then I almost cried because I felt I'm no longer alone. There are other people, there are angels that can empathize with me, that have gone through what I'm going through right now. So support Justice for Adjuncts. It's on a GoFundMe. It's ALDAF. We have already raised $1,699. We're a dollar short of $1,700. Our goal is to raise $5,000. That money is going to go to campaign for adjunct chapter presidents, leadership training, developing leadership for adjuncts. We are trying to take over our union, take it back for the majority. We each get one vote, adjunct or full-time. So I know what Keith said about meerkats, about the chopping off their head. So they just started chopping off my head. But my strategy was, when I started 2 months ago, Keith has been at it for 30 years. So don't even compare me to Keith. He's forgotten more than I would ever learn. In 18 months, we have another election coming up. We're going to have all the adjuncts vote for adjunct members to be the president of the union, to be the officers of the union, to the chapter presidents and delegates of the union, and take back our union. I asked them not to demonstrate, not to strike. I'm not asking them anything onerous. I'm just asking them to, and it's an anonymous vote conducted by a third party, League of Women Voters. So people can vote anonymously for adjunct candidates. So that's what I was trying to develop. But Keith is saying something that concerns me, that if we go that route, like take your union back, you're the majority, vote in adjuncts. If somebody else has tried that and failed, I'd like to know what happened and what went wrong, because that has been my strategy, and that's why we're raising funds. For example, this lawyer is writing me. I don't have a lawyer. We have no funds to get a lawyer to defend us. The union is using my dues. It has millions of dollars to get the best lawyers to rattle me, to intimidate me, like that letter. Even after all that money, that letter could not cite a single evidence that could be accepted in a competent court that I did wrong.
And doesn't it raise about the question about the lawyer? Because it seems like they're using the lawyer to intervene in a dispute over what should be and should not be the issues for a union. And
correct.
Having you threatening you with the lawyer is actually maybe a violation of the bar. He's going involved in the internal affairs of the union. This is an issue for struggle inside the union, not for the lawyer using his law firm to threaten to remove you by threatening you. It seems like that lawyer may be in trouble, actually.
Lawyers are not allowed to tell lies. And this lawyer has falsely accused him of doing something he hasn't done, and done it without evidence. So there are professional standards for lawyers in the state of California,
Right.
And complaints can be filed.
If I can, I want to bring up a point. Khaled's talking about the next election, and historically, from what I've seen in wall-to-wall unions, if you treat part-timers really badly, they won't join your union, which just gives them carte blanche to do whatever they want, and you can't vote. So full-time faculty are usually 99% union members, while part-time faculty are down in the 20 or so percent. So even if all part-timers voted, they will be outnumbered by the full-time membership.
Well, right now, David, our membership is 69% of our members are adjuncts that are actually signed union cards.
Bravo, good.
So they're probably worried that the adjuncts are going to get together and fight for their rights. And that's they think they can cut it off by suspending you and trying to prevent you from organizing. But it sounds like that's not going to stop you.
Well, I'm not resigning. I am keeping up. I actually sent that letter. I forwarded that letter. Remember, I told you I had a fellow adjunct on the e-board. So I forwarded that letter to him just as an FYI. And you know what he told me in his reply? He said, Lelo.
I'm afraid they won't forget.
They won't.
I don't think they're going to forget. And no. I think that this needs to be an issue for all working people. We need democratic unions.
The
we
point,
need unions that represent the members, and this bureaucracy that are making these high salaries apparently are putting their interests, their economic interests, above the majority of the members.
Yes.
right. The point I was trying to make is that even my brother in arm, my adjunct brother in arm, was telling me to just to walk away. So that's the environment I'm working in. But I have received so many replies to those 3 emails that I sent out, and there's real anger, but there's real fear. There's also real fear out there of losing their jobs because they're going up against their own supervisors.
Yeah.
So this is not going to be easy, but they have donated. Oh, did I tell you what happened to one person who donated, who forgot to do it privately? Her chapter president called her and completely attacked her for donating. And she actually wrote that in an email and sent it to me in a complaint, that my chapter president looked at the GoFundMe site, found my name, and called me up and accused me of doing something very, very wrong. And just completely berated her. And I have that email. So there's these things that are going on behind the curtain that we cannot see. So there's a lot of things at play. But what they're saying is that I have a conflict of interest because I'm trying to organize a competing union within the union. And what Steve mentioned before is that perhaps in the national, because I remember there was a dual unionism fight between AFL and CIO some time ago regarding dual unionism. So if the local doesn't have bylaws against these kind of things, perhaps they're going after what national bylaws are saying, that Steve is saying. And that's something for Keith to think about also, because I haven't researched those at all.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us, all of you. I think we've had a valuable discussion and important information. And I think that we at Work Week want to fight for worker rights, for union rights, equality for all workers.
Yes.
And we need to build solidarity. And we build solidarity by uniting all workers and fighting for equality of all workers. So thanks for joining us on Work Week.